Hello everyone, this is Andrea Taylor here from Bittern by the Bug. I'm here today to give some information about how you use and what you use for your stitching as far as needles and thread. Needles and thread obviously are integral to your stitching life. You couldn't do it without them, especially if you're you're a hand stitcher. And I'm here today to just talk about what needles are good for what purpose and why sometimes some needles are harder to use, and maybe you need to look at changing the type of needle that you're using. Okay, firstly, being a Sashiko worker for over 20 years, I'll probably talk best about Sashiko first. Okay, so Sashiko needles come in different multi-packs, all different types of packs now, much more than they used to. But multi-packs are good because you've got choice. And you've got long type needles, and you've got standard needles, and you've got really tiny ones as well. And people ask me when we're stitching, how do I know which needle to use? Okay, so the needles are different sizes for different purposes and for different thicknesses of thread. And I think that's probably what you need to remember absolutely firstly, is that if you're having trouble stitching with a needle, there's one of two things that are happening. Either the needle is the wrong size for the thread, or the thread is the wrong size for the needle. It's interchangeable, it goes without saying. So if when you thread a needle you end up with a big lump at the eye of thread, then your needle is too small. And the other way around, if you thread your needle and it keeps unthreading, or it is leaving big holes in your work, then your needle is too big for your thread. So it's finding the balance. And also, if your needle is too small and your thread is thick, it's going to be hard work to pull that thread through your work. I like multi-pack needles of Sashiko needles, the Bowen or the Clover, or even the Olympus, which is also a multi-pack of sizes. And I use them for most things, not just Sashiko, for most general stitching, because I like how they work. I don't bend them and they stay sharp. And sharpness is so important with the needle, so important. If it blunts too easily, you're going to then have, again, a hard time pulling that needle through your thread, through your fabric with your thread. Now, I like personally to use the needle that is about here, this third one in on the Clover, or this second one in here on the Bowen. That's my go-to needle. But if I'm doing really big long lines of Sashiko thread of stitching and I want to load lots and lots of stitches up on my needle, then I'll go to these big long ones. And then of course you've got these even longer ones that you can progress up to if you wish to. It is a good idea to put them somewhere which is recognisable, like an easy place to get hold of, whether you have a pouch here. This has got all needles packets in it, all different types, or a needle book is very, very useful as well. Okay, so what other needles do we have here? We also have Bowen Big Eye Sharps. Now I use those quite a bit for utilitarian sewing, putting on a button or mending something which isn't decorative mending, visible mending type things. They have big eyes, so they're easier to thread, because I know as we all get older, threading needles is an issue. and they're still sharp. So they're called a big eye sharp, and they again are multi-packet of sizes. If I'm sewing beads, fine seed beads, I have found these ones, size 10 sewing beads, needles from Bowman, the best needles I've had. They're short, they're not like a hair thinness, but they go through every seed bead that I've ever used and never failed me yet. Again, they're strong and I can't bend them out of shape, because I think that's important too. So I really, really like those. I occasionally will use a milliner's needle and a chenille needle. Now, your milliner's needle is a long needle with a squarish eye at the top. I haven't got any out here. I wonder if I've got any here. I should have. And milliner's needles are really good for doing knot work. So when I mean knot work, I mean colonial knots, French knots, grub rose type knots, which are bullion knots, anything like that is really good with a milliner's needle. Okay, and milliner's needles, like all needles, come in all different sizes. You can get really, really big ones, and you can get quite small ones, thin ones, fine ones as well. So in here I should have, we'll see if I have, some milliner's needles so I can show you. Back in many years ago, I did a lot of Brazilian embroidery work, and milliner's needles were very important. So milliner's needle. And the reason why is because a lot of Brazilian embroidery has multi twisted bullion knots that are huge, very, very long. And of course, a milliner's needle, we'll put it there. I suppose you better see it very well though. Milliner's needles don't have that lumpy bit at the eye. They don't flare out at the eye, so they're quite useful and good for that work. The other needle that is a go-to needle is a long darner. This is a long darner, and a long darner is for wool or thicker thread, wool obviously for darning. Still got a fairly sharp tip, but really good for bulky work, sort of bulky work. The other needle, which is invaluable in my life, is a chenille needle. Now, chenille needles come in all different sizes. They come in very, very fine ones, like this one here is a very, very fine one. Probably about 22. Maybe 24 is exceptionally fine, so maybe a 22. And they are wonderful for ribbon embroidery work, because you can pierce the ribbon with the needle because they're still sharp, and the eye will not harm the ribbon, and that's really important. They're also good for very special or different types of thread. This is chenille needles, including one I use all the time, which is called Gema tape. Gema tape is a flat cotton tape. It's just here, and you can embroider with it. You can do sashiko with it, which I do, and you can do standard embroidery as well. So here we go here. This is Gema tape, and here is my chenille needle. Okay, that I've been doing this work with. So all the knots were done with this needle in Gema tape, and all this was as well. And so is this. This is still all Gema tape. So even though it looks like sashiko, it isn't. Well, it is, but it's done with a different type of thread. It's done with Gema tape. It's interesting. It's something a bit different. It's still strong, and it's lovely to use, and it comes in amazing, beautiful colours too as well. Okay, so let's get into the other different threads that I use in my work. So you can see by this little pincushion here, this is actually this Gema tape. that I've used to do hidemasashi. It's fabulous to do hidemasashi because it covers and joins on with your opposing rows, and there's no gaps, and it's clean, and it sits on top of the fabric instead of sinking into it. So again, it is just lovely and interesting to use. Okay, now we do know that sashiko thread comes in all different thicknesses. Okay, it's just not sashiko thread. This is Olympus here, which is your standard beginner's thickness of sashiko thread. And now, if I was a beginner sashiko worker, I would be using that one. If I then would want to branch out to more intricate work, more detailed work, I might either go to Olympus Fine, which is this one here, this one here is the black one. You can see how fine, this has not long been around. You can see how fine that is. Or Daruma. Daruma is almost like the Rolls Royce of sashiko thread. It's exceptionally fine. And it is really, really, really good for doing this type of work also. For doing your creative patching type work, because it's fine. Now, this creative patching type work is very, very interpretive, meaning that every single person who does it will do it differently to another person, and that's exactly how it should be. Don't think you just have to do long lines of stitching. You can do whatever you want to do and mix up your stitch thicknesses and your stitch weights, and again, change your needles when you do that. I like to have quite fine weight thread when I do this work because I want to be able to see the fabric as well as the thread. I want people to have to look closely at what I've done rather than just look at stitches. So different stitches will form again by the different size of your needle. So your stitch length will get larger if you're stitching with a bigger needle. It only goes without saying. If you want to then do very fine work, then use a finer needle and a finer thread. Okay, so this one here, this little piece of freeform sashiko was using this black thread, this weight, and a finer needle, so the finer sashiko needle. So the finer sashiko needle is this tiny one on the side here. This little tiny one on the side there will enable you to do finer stitches because it's smaller, so you can get better detail of your work. So if the design is smaller, I think that can be the rule of thumb. Your design is smaller, then your thread and your needle can be finer and smaller needle. Okay, if you're looking at, and as you can see here, this piece here, this is a very fine thread because I wanted to see detail in this gentian flower. I wanted to see detail. But then you might look at this one here, which is my rotary cutter case. This is bold and expressive and really in your face and partially stitched too, being freeform. And this is a thicker thread. It's pretty obvious. They're like chalk and cheese. It's a thicker thread, but you'll get a different effect. Whereas on the front here, you have finer thread in your patching here, very fine thread actually, and you're looking more at the fabric than you are at the thread. The thread is there because it's holding it all together, but you're looking at the different types of fabric and the design more than you're looking at the thread that's holding it together. And that's the way I like it. But as I said, everyone is individual in this case and how they like to stitch. It's almost like your thumbprint. It's like such an individual thing that we do when we stitch. Okay, this is another example of fine stitching because of what is stitched. I wanted the rabbits that replicate this fabric here, and I wanted the detail to be in them, so the thread is finer. If I had done a thicker thread, there would be less stitches and less definition and less shape to the little rabbits. So there are reasons behind changing your thread to get the results that you want. Okay, this here is a little bit of coggan or free style coggan. So coggan is the other type of sashiko. So there are several types of sashiko. There's not just one, this one here. There's several. And this one's always done on an even weave linen or even weave fabric. It can be Aida. And this then is counted from a graph. So this is very methodical patterning. And enjoyable to do, really nice to do, and you can see almost inspirations from other people of the world that come in to this sort of stitching. Okay, so what else have I got here to show you today and to talk about? Pearl thread. Let's talk about pearl thread. So this is pearl 8. Pearl comes in different weights. We have 12. I believe there is 16 too, and that's even finer. So 16, 12, 8, 5 and 3. 3's got a little harder to get and it's very thick. Okay, pearl thread. I never substitute pearl thread, sashiko thread for pearl. Never. I have never done it. There is a couple of reasons. Pearl thread is slightly glossy and it's very tightly twisted. Sashiko thread is not. It is matte and it's not overly twisted. And the difference being here, when you wash fabric with sashiko thread in, the thread will slightly swell and it becomes one with your fabric. Pearl does not do that. Okay, it was never designed to do that. So sashiko thread was designed to work sashiko. Okay, but we are all different and we all like to experiment. And go for it, is what I say. If you want to experiment, just go for it. And I certainly do. Again, this is Hitamasashi, which is done in Gima tape. And I certainly really push the boundaries and do what I feel like I want to do. Okay, this is my symbol, which is a cicada, which means rebirth, renewal. And it applies to me in a personal way. I hope you have enjoyed looking at my videos, and I hope to be back at another time to do more. I've enjoyed being here and sharing some of my thoughts and some of the way I stitch. My products, my needles, my threads, everything that you see that I have talked about, I actually use in my daily life. It is not something that I pass over to people. I use them, so they are important in my life. I will leave you with looking at my work, my different work, and this is my final one I'll show you. Again, I don't always do blue. Sometimes I do these type of fabrics as well if I can get them. And again, this is sashiko stitching using Gima tape. It is my favourite at the moment, but there could be another one on the horizon, who knows. Thank you for listening and see you again another day. Thank you.